Once again, it's a privilege to be welcome into your homes. Today, we are reading from Luke chapter 18, verse 9 to 14. Jesus addressed this parable to those who were convinced of their own righteousness and despised everyone else. Two people went up to the temple area to pray. One was a Pharisee, and the other was a tax collector. The Pharisee took up his position and spoke this prayer to himself. "O God, I thank you that I'm not like the rest of humanity, greedy, dishonest, adulterous, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week, and I pay tithe on my whole income." But the tax collector stood off at a distance and would not even raise his eyes to heaven, but beat his breast and prayed, "O God, be merciful to me, a sinner." I tell you, the latter went home justified, not the former. For whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and the one who humbles himself will be exalted. The prayer of the Pharisee begins well. He thanks God that he has lived according to God's law, thereby showing his dependence on God for all his good acts. This particular Pharisee has gone beyond what the Jewish law required. The law did not insist that everything be tithed, but this Pharisee pays a tithe on all his possessions. There is also no requirement in the Jewish law to fast as often as twice a week, which this Pharisee does. He would have been seen as expressing outstanding fidelity to God's law. However, his prayer had one fatal flaw. In his prayer, he sat in judgment upon the great mass of humanity, conveniently represented by the tax collector alongside him. He expressed a mentality which those who take their faith seriously can sometimes fall into. It is the mentality which compares our own actions favorably to those whose lives seem to us far less religious or virtuous. The Pharisee had forgotten that obedience to God's law cannot be separated from loving one's neighbor as oneself. Religious observance without compassion for others is not acceptable to God. The tax collector stands far off from others, perhaps indicating his sense of isolation from the community. He does not even raise his eyes towards heaven, suggesting that he feels unworthy to be talking to God. In beating his breast, he acknowledges his sin. The tax collector's prayer is much more important than the prayer of the Pharisee. He recognizes that he is a sinner who is in need of God's mercy. He has come to the temple believing that he can find forgiveness from God for his sin, and his humble prayer for mercy is without any judgment of others. Unlike the Pharisee, the tax collector is aware that he has nothing to offer God, but everything to receive from God. He knows that he can sink no further, and that if anyone is to rescue him, it can only be God. Whereas the Pharisee looked around, comparing himself favorably to others, the tax collector looked within, comparing himself unfavorably to God. He recognizes his own inner truth, such as it is, and he hopes, indeed, he trusts that God can take care of it. Dear friends, the parable encourages us to place our trust in God more than in ourselves. It assures us that if we come before God empty-handed, recognizing our poverty, God's loving mercy towards us will know no bounds. Shalom. Peace.